Stendhal's The Red and the Black is not a conventional romance, nor is it a simple cautionary tale. It is a poisoned dagger forged in the dirt of a peasant's backyard, aimed directly at the throat of post-Napoleonic French society. Too often, modern audiences dismiss this masterpiece as a cynical handbook on how a low-born opportunist seduces upper-class women to climb the social ladder. Today, we strip away that superficial skin. Using an unflinching lens, we will dissect the tragic trajectory of a high IQ mastermind who tried to outsmart a rigid caste system, only to end up orchestrating his own execution. Our story begins in a dead-end era. The protagonist, Julien Sorel, is the son of a brutal provincial carpenter. He is physically slight, emotionally volatile, and possesses a mind so sharp he can recite the entire Latin Bible from memory. But in France during the Bourbon Restoration, genius without a noble lineage is entirely worthless. Your birth is your permanent sentence. Yet, deep within Julien's chest burns a dangerous, treasonous secret. He is a fanatical worshipper of Napoleon Bonaparte. During the emperor's reign, merit was currency. A carpenter's son could earn his epaulettes and die a general on the battlefield. That was the age of red, the era of blood, glory, and uniform. But Napoleon fell, the old aristocracy crawled back into power, and the gates of military glory were locked. In this restructured world, only one dark path remained open to the ambitious poor: the black cassock of the Catholic clergy. This is the foundational code of the title. The red represents the soldier's uniform, a dead dream of heroic meritocracy. The black represents the priest's robes, the only surviving passport for a low-born man to infiltrate the ruling class through performance and hypocrisy. To climb, Julien must bury his inner scarlet fire and adopt the mask of a pious, submissive servant of the black. Julien's first stepping stone is the household of Monsieur de Rênal, the ultra-royalist mayor of a small town. Mayor hires Julien as a live-in tutor, simply to flaunt his wealth to his neighbors. Within this house of commerce, Julien encounters the mayor's wife, Madame de Rênal. Let us deconstruct their famous affair with absolute candor. Initially, Julien feels zero genuine affection for this noble woman. His approach is driven entirely by class hatred and a desperate need for validation. In her presence, Julien is paralyzed by his own inferiority complex. He views the conquest of this aristocratic woman not as a romantic pursuit, but as a Napoleonic military campaign. When he resolves to hold her hand in the dark garden, he does so out of a rigid sense of duty, telling himself, "If I do not take her hand tonight, I am a coward who deserves to stay in the mud forever." But history's cruelest irony is that this low-born boy arrived with a calculated strategy and a hidden knife, only to crash headfirst into the only sanctuary of unconditional tenderness he would ever know. But history's cruelest irony is that this low-born boy arrived with a calculated strategy and a hidden knife, only to crash headfirst into the only sanctuary of unconditional tenderness he would ever know. Madame de Rênal is a true idealist. She sees past Julien's sharp edges and decodes the profound, agonizing vulnerability born of his low birth. She bathes his weaponized soul in a pure, motherly affection. Julien surrenders. For the first time in his life, he experiences the warmth of being treated as a human being worthy of respect. She bathes his weaponized soul in a pure, motherly affection. Julien surrenders. For the first time in his life, he experiences the warmth of being treated as a human being worthy of respect. The fences of class soon sound the alarm. Their affair is exposed. In a respectable provincial town, scandal equals an unacceptable loss of political capital. To preserve their mutual honor, Julien is evicted from his paradise and sent to the next station of his ascension: the seminary. If the mayor's parlor was a minor skirmish, the Besançon seminary is a total war against human nature. Here, Julien witnesses the absolute apex of the sable machine. The seminary is crowded with impoverished peasant boys seeking to escape starvation by obtaining ordination. In this arena, intellectual brilliance and theological mastery are not virtues. They are liabilities. The sole metric of success here is the flawless performance of holy stupidity. Julien, because he is genuinely intelligent, reads too fast, and displays an analytical mind, is immediately branded an infidel and a danger to the institution. He faces total isolation and systematic sabotage from his peers. To put it plainly, in an empire of liars, the man who appears too perfect is the first to be crucified. Seminary teaches Julien his ultimate sociological lesson. He systematically executes his own pride. He learns to play the fool, to speak in holy platitudes, and to bow his head lower than the rest. He becomes an apex predator, submerged in the mud, waiting for high society to cast its net. His performance pays off. He is recommended to one of the most powerful political masterminds in Paris, the Marquis de la Mole, becoming his private secretary. He has finally obtained his clearance into the inner sanctum of French power. In Paris, Julien enters the final, most dangerous gamble of his life. He meets Mathilde de la Mole. Mathilde is an aristocrat of the highest order, bored, haughty, and obsessed with the violent, blood-soaked heroism of her medieval ancestors. She despises the pale, sycophantic young nobles of her own class, and is instantly captivated by the feral, lupine intensity of the carpenter's son standing in the shadows. What follows is an exquisite psychological chess match between two megalomaniacs. Mathilde falls in love with Julien because she views him as a transgressive experiment against her own class. Julien engages Mathilde because he seeks to conquer the ultimate symbol of the aristocracy that despised him. They torture each other systematically, exchanging vows of absolute devotion one day and masks of freezing indifference the next. They torture each other systematically, exchanging vows of absolute devotion one day and masks of freezing indifference the next. Ultimately, the peasant boy wins. Mathilde becomes pregnant. Faced with total ruin or compromise, the Marquis capitulates. He grants Julien a noble title, vast estates, and a commission as a lieutenant in a regiment of hussars. Julien takes off his black cassock. He finally dons the brilliant scarlet uniform of his Napoleonic dreams. Julien takes off his black cassock. He finally dons the brilliant scarlet uniform of his Napoleonic dreams. He stands one step away from absolute victory. And yet, the moment the world bows to his genius, the heavy wheel of fate makes a catastrophic turn. Under the violent coercion of her confessor-priest, a sick and guilt-ridden Madame de Rênal signs a denunciation letter sent to the Marquis, characterizing Julien as a heartless careerist who systematically seduces upper-class women to extract social promotion. In an instant, the Marquis revokes everything. Title, the lands, the hussar uniform, vanished in a single afternoon. Julien goes mad. It is not the loss of the position that breaks him, but the absolute despair of being weighed and discarded by the world yet again. He buys 2 pistols, travels to Verrières, and enters the church where his former lover is praying. He fires 2 shots into her back. Those shots are not an act of revenge. They are the desperate, apocalyptic scream of a blunt instrument crashing against the stone wall of an unyielding world. His final days in the death cell are the only clean moments of Julien's life. Madame de Rênal survives the attack. She forgives him completely, visiting him daily in his dungeon. Within these suffocating stone walls, Julien discards both the scarlet uniform of his ambition and the black cassock of his hypocrisy. He realizes that the high society of Paris he spent his entire life trying to conquer was nothing more than a corrupt masquerade, and the only love capable of redeeming his soul was the one he sought to destroy in the church. At his trial, Julien rejects all legal defense. He stands before a jury composed entirely of wealthy bourgeois and aristocrats, and delivers his final verdict on society. "Gentlemen," he smiles, "I have no illusions. My true crime is not the shooting. My crime is that a peasant's son has dared to rebel against his low birth. My crime is that I dared to mix with your class. I ask for no mercy, because in a world governed by your rules, the only dignity left for a man like me is to climb the scaffold with his head held high." Julien Sorel is dead. The most brilliant mind of 19th century France rolls from the scaffold into the sawdust. Mathilde de la Mole, acting out her medieval Gothic fantasy, takes his severed head into her lap, burying it herself in a mountain cave. While Madame de Rênal, who loved him without condition, dies quietly in her bed 3 days later, cradling his memory in the silence of her heart. Stendhal's The Red and the Black remains a monumental pillar in Western literature because it uses a scalpel to slice through the polite, civilized infrastructure of class society. Julien was a genius born into an era that had no use for low-born talent. He thought he could outmaneuver the system by weaponizing its own hypocrisy against it. But the architecture of power is too heavy. If you play its game, its gravity will eventually crush you, leaving your ambition and your soul buried deep within the dirt. Blade falls, but the ballrooms of Paris continue to dance. The polite elite continue to lie with absolute elegance, while the carpenter's son who tried to pierce the night with lightning is permanently swallowed by the dark.